Rolling. We're live.
Hey, what's going on, everybody? Welcome to the Hidden Health Podcast. This is Jesse,
Now I'm Ruben.
and we're so excited to have you here again. And today will not be our regular,
Programming.
regular programming. Thank you, Ruben. It will not be a regular programming. This was a spur of the moment decision to jump on and have a conversation about, as humans in America, dealing with American things and global things at large. Uh, let's talk about it. Yesterday, I saw an article and we'll make sure to keep we'll put the article in the show notes. We'll do our best to everything we talk about today. If we have any resources for it, we'll put it in the show notes. So yesterday was an interesting spur of events. I saw an article that basically Spotify employees are threatening to go on strike unless they get access to have direct editorial oversight over Joe Rogan's podcast. And of course, as a fan of Joe Rogan, as someone who sees him as a shining light in our society for the sense that he's a pretty strong moderate. There are things I agree with him on, things I don't agree, and he recognizes that, and he brings on people to have interesting conversations and make fun of all the, absurdity that's going on in our country. And it really, me personally, because I'm just like you, the listener, who is wondering what the hell is going on in our country, and there are times where it could feel hopeless. And Joe's podcast is definitely a podcast I personally go to get a sense of relief, or a sense of, if there's so many people watching this, that means there are other people like me who are seeing that this is all sort of chaotic, and that there's a better way, and that there's a more fair and just and more comedically light way of going about things. So when I read this article, I got really upset. I forwarded it to Ruben immediately, and he got really upset. And I was just infuriated with the fact that these people wanted to do this, that they wanted to edit this guy's podcast, that they were so afraid and concerned about one person's views or understandings on certain topics. Even if he's just talking shit, which he says over and over again, he's a comedian. He talks shit, and it's okay. And then, I'm still upset. And then I watched The Social Dilemma. I watched The Social Dilemma on Netflix, and the first thing that came to mind was like, this is the exact reaction I was supposed to have. And what made a lot of sense to me after watching The Social Dilemma, if you haven't watched it, go watch it. If you have access to it, get one of your friends to give you a password. It might be free on the website. I think it is.
Nice.
If you don't have Netflix, correct me if I'm wrong here, but try to find a way to go watch it. I'm sure there's a bunch of ways to do that. And the basis of it is basically how social media plays into the intense polarization that we're seeing in our country and in our world. And after watching it, it made a lot of sense to me, actually, why these people at Spotify, who I deemed initially as, these people are crazy, these people are, soft, these people are, just insane. Like, I literally initially thought these people were just insane, and I had no idea how these crazy ass people could work at a company and make a living and do all these things and still be so out of whack. But then after watching Social Dilemma, it made total sense, because if you're someone who, let's say for this sake, leans left, right? If you're someone who leans left, and there's lots wrong with the right as well. I think or people who deem themselves as right. There's nothing wrong with the right. There's nothing wrong with the left. It's just people who prescribe to certain ideologies tend to take them a little too far. So the uh, if you're someone who leans left or is part of the LGBTQ community, then there are people, not all, but there are people in those communities that have certain feelings about the archetypes like Joe Rogan, like Jordan Peterson, like Larry Elder, like Candace Owens. There are opinions about these people. And when you're someone who's been directly affected by people in your life who offend you or feel like you've been victimized or have been told that you are a victim, if you've been told you are a victim and that you have an oppressor, and then you start learning that Joe Rogan's your oppressor, you start learning that white men are your oppressors, you start learning that um, uh, cisgendered straight people are your oppressors. When you start learning this, and then you have a system, I mean social media, AI, Facebook, Instagram, all these things that then feed you an understanding, feed you only that which affirms your beliefs because it gives you more airtime on their platforms, and you can see more ads and buy more products and spend more money, and they make more money from these people who are buying advertising. When that's all you see and you don't see anything else, which I am definitely subject to in a different way. I literally get zero content about LGBTQ, zero content.
Same
I
here.
don't know any influencers in that space. I don't know anyone, anything, any products, any communities. I don't know a thing. I don't get any content for them. And that was very, blatantly showed to me by a conversation I had with my girlfriend recently. That's a different topic. But when that's all you see and you're stuck in your phone, you're stuck at home, you're not talking to people, that's what you think the world is. You think the world is made up of these specific bad people that are against these specific ideologies, which happen to be your ideologies. And if there's not something done about them by these certain industries, then you're screwed. So when you go on strike for a guy like Joe Rogan, you really think you're doing the world a service. You really think you're standing up for something that's right. And also, when you listen to Joe Rogan's podcast, it's all from the frame of mind that Joe's evil, white men are evil, they don't understand, they don't care, they. And the right can do the same thing. People on different sides can do the same thing. I've done that to people. So it was just a huge wake-up call that I myself am deeply, uh, you know, uh, susceptible to what's going on, and that I take back all my frustration. I don't want to say I take back. I'm still very frustrated. People want to strike Joe Rogan's podcast, uh, but there's such a much stronger level of understanding, and uh, it just, I really wanted to talk about this with you, Ruben, because it's on my mind. I'm feeling really passionate about it, and I'm just curious to know your feelings, man, and how you're taking all of this in, from your standpoint. And what the fuck, like, what the fuck do we do? How do we move forward from this?
I think that's probably the biggest question on everyone's mind. I definitely can only speak from experience. I know at the beginning of the year, even before COVID and everything, I remember thinking, I'm like, am I seeing things too one-sided? Like, is
Mm.
there something here? Right. And I don't know if it's age, or I don't know. It may be my curious mind. Like ever since I was a kid, I asked why for everything. Like, oh, why do people hate this person? And I would dig in. No matter how much I disagree with that person, I would dig in to see why people dislike this person, whether that's President Trump. Well, I haven't read anything. I tried to see like both sides of him, the full story. I feel like, 2020 is, in terms of vision, is perfect vision. And I think social media, your parents, your family members, your friends, all the people you deal with who kind of like feed you, like, you're right, you're right. They're constantly saying, you're right. It's good to agree with this, are doing you a disservice. And that's why I love people like Joe Rogan. This year I was just like, I'm going to dig into that question of why and really see the full story. And I'm not saying I think Trump is a great president. I still don't like him. A lot of things he's done and said are horrible things. um, but just like any other human, we've all done some stupid shit, we've all done horrible shit, some more than others. But it's like, what is the whole picture though? Am I being fed just one side of a person or a quarter of them? And this is for everyone in general. That's why you mentioned Candace Owens, for instance. I remember when I first heard her, I was like, this bitch is crazy. I was like, and I've heard that a lot. A lot of people have said that, but I'm like, but a lot of things she's saying is kind of interesting. It's going against the narrative that I'm seeing. So I started to dig in. I listened to her recent book because I was just like, and while I don't agree with some stuff, and there's still some stuff that I need to research myself, so I'm not giving her a pass at all. It's just a matter of like, what these things that she's saying, are they true? How true are they? Are people taking things out of context? Something she said in the book really stuck out to me, which was a Frederick Douglass speech, and how people take it out of context. They don't listen to the whole speech. And she was basically saying, you need to listen to the whole thing, because when he said these specific things, he was still a slave. While people are saying, well, he said that after, he was freed and he was able to work. And I'm like, oh, people take things out of context. Then you listen to Joe Rogan. They're like, people take him out of context all the time. They just give you a snippet of what he said. But like, you're like, no, you got to go and listen to the whole thing. Yeah, it's uncomfortable. Yeah, it's a long time. Yeah, it's an investment, but it's your responsibility, especially we're talking about Americans. I'm like, it's my responsibility to dig in. It's my responsibility to be like, oh, I'm just seeing a small 10-minute clip of a 3-hour podcast. I'm only getting a snippet. So I need to listen to the whole thing if this is something that's triggering me. Something that just recently, I was listening to Bridget on his podcast, and I posted it the other day. Did you see that post the audio?
I think that's what made me want to actually go listen to the episode. Yeah.
Yeah, she said something that was beautiful. She was like, if I read something or hear something and it hits all the right triggers, right? Like I'm like in full agreement of this. I'm like, oh, wait, I need to take a step back. I need to think and be like, wait, this is literally working on me. Let me see the other side. And I have to go and like dig deep. And she was like, whether that's listening or reading the article or reading the study and reading all these things and really digging in and going down the rabbit hole for you to understand. It's unfortunate. The internet has given us something beautiful while making communication with people from all over the world easier. The downside and the dark side of it is that we're being fed a certain narrative depending on your search results, depending on who you follow, depending on what you listen to. Like Social Dilemma really like showed that. I love how they started with the whole Google. You can search the same, like you can start the same like keyword, and depending on your country and location, you'll get a different result
Yeah.
because it's being fed a certain narrative. And you're like, are we becoming like China, right? Where they're a communist regime still to this day, and they're feeding you a narrative, right? And it's just like, wait, we live in America where we're supposed to have freedom and the First Amendment, right? Like when you shared that article with me, I was like, wait, we're one of the only countries that have that First Amendment, free speech. Whether I'm wrong or right, I should still have the ability to show my free speech and not let these social media,
Yeah.
YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, take certain things down because I was talking about a conspiracy theory that's probably not true, but I still have the ability of free speech, and it's up to the people to dig in, and do that responsibly and like look into the data and look into the information, and up to them to make a decision. I think when I started reading this, I'm like, oh, that's why I like to read books, because I get the full story in a book. If I want to read about Abraham Lincoln, well, if you agree with him or not, if you think he was a slave person, you want to take down his fucking statue, I don't know, right? but there's still certain things that he did which were fantastic. And there's many books on him. I've read about two already, but it still doesn't give me the full story, right?
Yeah,
And
but
plus,
if someone who you follow and idolize goes, Abraham Lincoln was a jackass, of course you want to take down the statue, right? Because
mm-hmm,
the person you idolize is the one who's telling you what is your truth. You know,
right,
you're being fed what your truth is, you know, and you don't, you're not going to take, it takes two, she said it in the podcast too, where it's like, you know, I can either invest in an hour, half an hour to an hour to really understand what I'm reading, or take 10 minutes and get angry. Like, which one am I going to do? Naturally, I'm going to just go and get angry because it's the easier thing to do.
exactly. It was so that podcast was great, and like while I didn't listen to the whole thing, there was certain parts that I was just like, I need to zone in on this. I need to rewind because I listen to podcasts while I'm doing other things, like whether I'm working out, cleaning the dishes, whatever. And there were a lot of things she was saying, whether that was like they talked about defunding the police, and I remember having like taking my headphones off and telling Karina, you need to listen to this because we've had conversations about that and how like I agree with what like Jocko Willink has discussed on Joe Rogan's podcast about like, wait, that might be a bad idea. Like, yeah, you want to allocate the money correctly, great, fine. But we need to make sure that our officers are trained in hand-to-hand combat. I like Andrew Yang's stance on that, fucking Yang Gang all the way. I love his stance on like every cop should be, I think it was like a purple belt in
Yeah,
jujitsu, right? That gives them the ability to disarm. It gives them the ability to hold someone down without hurting them, right? It gives them these abilities where they don't have to immediately go for the gun, right?
yeah,
But also like looking at all these things that are being told and the narrative that's being sold to us right now. It's just like, wait, hold on. You need to feed me the full story because I'm not getting the full story. And my Google searches have been wild because I'm looking at everything from I'm looking at Trevor Noah's daily shows, but I'm also listening to the Ruben report or
mm,
I'm listening to Joe Rogan, who's more of a moderator, and he has all these different variety of people on. So my search results are all over the place. Like
yeah,
sometimes I get ads for Joe Biden to vote for him, and sometimes I get ads to vote for Trump. And I'm
yeah.
like, oh, I'm being fed a certain narrative depending on the searches that I'm making because I'm trying to get the full story of something. I'm trying to figure it out. And the algorithm is working on those things, but it's also being confused itself because there's no humans doing it. It's all AI being controlling this right now. And the AI, unfortunately, has the biases of the people that created it. So it's like, it's a whole system, and it's like, what do we do? And it's just
Well, it's
like,
not only that they have the biases of the people who created it, they have individual biases for the individual who's using it. So all they care about is what you care about. That's
exactly.
it. If you, it just automatically will find content that you agree with, and will not. It's not interested in showing you anything else.
And
Um,
that's horrible. I think that these companies should be like, hey, I'm feeding you this narrative, but you should also look at this. And even though it doesn't, you don't agree with it, but you want the full story. Like this should be part of an algorithm, whether that's YouTube, you know how it says up next, that up next section should be like, oh, you're listening to this specific person who may be like super conservative. I don't know, maybe you're conservative and you're, it's like, wait, you should check out this person. While it's a liberal stance, they also talk about this and seen the other side of it because not everything is meant to make sense in a sense, right? Um, and that includes like all the stuff going on right now. There's so many pieces to it, so much nuance that is just like, wait, what will make more sense for people to be, you know, safe and or at least all our like Maslow hierarchy of needs, right? The first one on the bottom, I forget what it's called, but basically your safety, so your security, your protection, your food, your sex, like all those things are taken care of,
yeah,
and then we can move on from there.
yeah,
But yeah, like I don't know.
yeah, and you know something that came up while you were talking, which, and by the way, all these things, like, I think one of the biggest reasons that I'm upset is because I have seen myself fall subject to this. So it, uh, you know, I have had a history of idolizing people, and I had been fortunate enough to work for some of these people. And when you work for the people you idolize, what you find is that they're fucking people, and that um, uh, and that they make a ton of bad decisions and have and are unevolved in some ways and are um, broken and in pain and are and have different opinions than you and all these things. But if they're selling a product or if they're someone who has a specific idea, they're going to curate their content towards that, you know. And one of the biggest lessons I had to learn in my life, because there was a period of time, not too long ago, but there was a period of time where I was searching for uh, male mentorship, and I was searching it in men who had specific, very specific attributes, be it that they were physically in great shape, be it that they were made good money, be it that they were knowledgeable in certain things or had a great social life, just areas that I wanted. And these would be men who are much older than me, and I'd be 19, 20, 21. I'm 23 now, but especially when I was between 18 to 20, this is a strong thing that I did, which is I would give my all in real life, not on social media. I would give my all to these men, right? Whatever they're doing, I'd say, hey, I'm down to help you out with this, this, and this, and I'm ready to support you. And I'd break my back working for these guys. And then the moment, um, uh, and then it always come out in disappointment and in some level of chaos. And I used to blame them. I used to blame these people for my chaos. But then what I came to realize was it's on me to protect my own mind. It's on me to guard my own self, and that understanding that these are people with their own agendas, and some of what they do is awesome, and some of what they do is terrible, and I have to create the discernment of what's going to work for me and what doesn't. And so, what that taught me, and it may be a big reason why I don't find myself leaning too far left, leaning too far right, living with um, uh, as a direct piece of the polarization. In some ways, I'm sure I definitely do. In some ways, me and Ruben have had conversations where both of us have been incredibly triggered. But at the end of the day, I think what this taught me was that I don't have to, just because I like someone or am a fan of what someone does or how someone is, doesn't mean I need to agree or disagree with everything they say. A great example of this is Elliot Hulse. Like,
I was just gonna use him as an example
oh,
too.
please, yeah, please, go ahead, go ahead, go ahead.
But I'm pretty sure you're gonna say the same thing. Like we grew up with this man. Like he
Yeah,
is a father figure to us in a sense, right? Like a mentor. I've been following him since I was 20, 21. So that's almost 10 years, man. Like you've been following him for since you were a teenager. Um, and like the stuff he said always it helped me, right? Whether I was in fitness, my mental model, the way I am with in my relationship with Karina, like I learned a lot from this man. He gave me so much. And then like until what, 2 to 3 years ago, he really like took a turn, right? Like he took a turn and I
yeah,
was just like, whoa, like who is this person? You know what I mean? Like it threw me off guard.
yeah.
And he started talking about things I was just like, whoa, a very red pill. And I was just like, I'm not agreeing with like 90% of what this dude is saying now. I will watch his videos and I was like, it was my first foray into like changing the narrative in my brain that I've been fed for so long, right? Um, and I was just like, I don't agree with that. I don't agree with that. And I kept saying that. And at one point, I stopped following him completely. I stopped following him. And then like I went through my own struggle. I was just like, where is this coming from? And I started studying the masculine and the energy of the masculine and like what happens when you lose him? What do you feel? Where's the weakness come in? And I was just like, I went back to Elliot Hulse and I was just like, wait, he's saying some stuff that makes sense.
Mhm.
And I started readjusting. And it helped. Again, once again, this man came in back into my life and it helped. But I still have things that he says. I'm just like, dude, no, shut up. Like, what are you saying? I don't agree with that. Like, you're making no sense. Oh, you're way too like out there for me right now. And I won't watch those videos. But lately I've been forcing myself to watch those videos to see what is he saying? What is he reading? Oh, he's super religious right now. I'm still not religious.
Yeah.
You offered me the book to read. What is the Bible? Fascinating book. I'm still not religious.
Mhm.
Like I believe
And
it.
that's okay.
And that's okay, right? Like and I don't, like I'm not gonna probably be religious when I finish the book, but like he's become super religious. But I'm like, okay, I understand that yes, the Bible has caused a lot of hurt in the past, a lot of war, a lot of death, because but it's not the Bible, the book itself, it's the actual person who read the book and received a certain message from it and skewed it in their way. So I'm like, oh, it's actually way more nuanced than that. But
Exactly.
and Elliot Host really talks about that, and he talks about like, hey, try to read this book and this book and this book. So I love the fact that he does it. He's like, hey, do your own shit.
Yeah.
Like I'm not gonna feed it to you because once again, playing like the maternal or the father, like the paternal, like I need to show you everything. No, fucking figure it out yourself, you know. And I love that Elliot Host does that. But still to this day, I don't agree with a lot of the things he said, and I'm sure like I mean, you know more because you took his course and you kind of were able to see like the full Elliot Hulse because of his course. So yeah, I think you should talk about that more. And if you don't know who Elliot Hulse is, you can probably explain that too.
Yeah, I mean, just go check him out. He's got loads of content from how to train, how to be with women, how to be with men, how to be a man, how to be a good man. Um, and if you look, and you can see his evolution over the years. Like the man he is now is very different than the man he was when I started following him. You know, um, and yeah, absolutely. You know, like I had a similar reaction. He started coming out with content that was heavy red pill, very aggressive in certain ways, and I did not agree with that content. But there were things where I could feel that to some level I really didn't agree with it. But to another level, it was like, oh, this makes sense, but it doesn't fit the narrative that I live in, right? And that's a huge distinction, because you want, I think people want to feel like the narrative they live in, meaning the life that they live in, the way they live it is the right way, or it's the good way, or the healthy way. And when you have someone, especially someone who you followed for a long time and looked up to, I think that was a huge mindfuck. Because it's one thing when if I always thought Elliot Hulse was a bad person, and all of his content was stupid and idiotic and misogynistic. If I came from that frame point, um, uh,
Your mind
then
shuts down.
yeah, and then everything he says would always come from that frame point, and I would not see him as a man who's evolved over time and had different ideas and supported me in a lot of ways, and someone who mirrors who I am as a person. I wouldn't have that perspective. I would only have the perspective that this is a bad man. But because he was so influential, it was very difficult for me to be like, well, I'm just going to disregard everything he's saying, because I'm like, well, this is the same Elliot who helped me, but right now his content is challenging me,
Mm.
because it's different than the narrative I prescribe to, which is a very a very sort of, I guess in the beginning at least, it's shifted a lot in the last months as we've been doing this work, but very liberal. I'm from New York City. Um, I'm definitely a hippie at heart. I love psychedelics. I, worked at a place that, where we hosted events for Deepak Chopra, and we had Andrew Yang there, and we had all these different mystics and people who were interested in shamanism and psychedelics and meditation, very, very liberal sort of ideas, or classically liberal ideas. And I worked for many years with in companies where there were a lot of women, especially that one. That one I was probably like one of four, like the ratio of like man to woman in that company was probably like 1 to 4 or something similar. So the I'm used to those environments. And so when Elliot was sharing a lot of this content, it really fucking fucked with me.
Mm.
But fortunately, I had that experience of like, don't idolize any man and don't hate any man. Take what you feel resonates, um, and learn and see that it's okay. It's okay to disagree. You know, it's okay to disagree with those people you're a fan of. Not everything Joe Rogan says I agree with. You know,
Same
not
here.
everything he says I think is right or just or is
And
the
even the people he has on, some of them I'm just like, why did you have this person on? You know, like
exactly, and that's okay. Um, and you know that part of the point that I wanted to share with people, just as a thought, is like if you find yourself hating someone, right? Like if you hate Trump, you're automatically victimizing yourself.
mm,
You're saying that the things in your life that are not working is not because of you. It's not because of your shortcomings or your inability to rise to the occasion or your inability to make progress in your life or change or be a better person. You are saying that it's because of Trump that this is my reality, or these are other people's realities, right? And that they can't be any different until Trump is different or we have a different president or whatever it is. And you can do that with anyone. You can do that. Like the reason why those people at Spotify want Joe Rogan's content to be monitored is because they actually believe that what he says has an impact, has a real substantial impact on how people um, participate in life,
mm,
or how they participate in life. That what he's saying is impacting their own realities, right? And that's doing a disservice to yourself, first and foremost, because you're not taking ownership of your life. You're not saying that like it does not matter what anyone says as long as they're not fucking. If Joe Rogan showed up to your house with a shotgun, that's a different story. You know, we should put that man away. He's creating physical obstacles for you, unfair physical obstacles for you to progress in life and to believe what you want to believe. But if he's doing none of that, and even more so, all he's doing is joking and having conversation, right? In a podcast, right? He literally has no substantial weight over your world.
mm.
So when first, that's a disservice to yourself, and then secondly, it's a disservice to other people because what you're saying is that people are so soft, people are so dumb, people are so quick to believe whatever the fuck they want, whatever the fuck someone else says, that they don't have the ability to have discourse. They don't have the ability to have nuance. They don't have the ability to decide for themselves what they believe and what they don't believe. And that's probably because that's what you do. You probably listen to people that have very specific views and you
Mm-hmm.
just go along with those views. And you're assuming that everyone goes along with views, right?
Right.
If you go along with just whatever this person says, whatever this leader in your world says, then you just assume, well, and you're not doing this consciously, but you assume the other people are doing the same thing. And yes, there are people who are doing the same thing, but here are two men who don't do that. So don't take this whatever this is, even if he was fucking Alex Jones, even if he was someone who had really radical views, I don't want them to be put away because there's grains of information
Right.
and that's in all of these things. You know, you could learn. Like I'm Jewish, and when people talk about what they learned from Hitler, I'm not like, how could they even talk about this thing from Hitler? What Hitler
Right.
did was terrible. Everyone agrees with that, but we want to understand why. Why did he do that? How
Right.
was he able to do that? So
Right.
we don't do that again. Once I forgot who said the quote, but it's like, you know, uh, you can learn. Sometimes it's good to learn what to do, and sometimes it's even better to learn what
What not
not
to
to do.
do. Yep.
You know,
I've heard
you know what
this.
I mean? So
100%. I love that you said that because it's something that we don't. I feel like when you go online, right, and you're looking for something to learn, whether let's talk about nutrition, since we we specialize in that. Like
Yeah,
we
that's what I was
coach
saying.
in that, right? And you'll see a lot of videos on what to do in a specific diet regimen, right? But you don't really see on what not to do. Or you'll see like the videos are shorter, and you're just like, you're still like skewing people's results in terms of what not to do. And recently I was looking at Thomas Duller. If y'all don't know him, he's like a nutrition like expert on YouTube. He's not a doctor or anything, but a lot of what he says is pretty good. He always brings up studies. You can dig into the studies. He had that guy that got famous for doing fit to fat, where this guy gets fat and then he becomes fit and then he becomes fat again and then becomes fit. And he utilizes different diet modalities. He'll do veganism, he'll do keto, he'll do carnivore, like, which is very fascinating. And like recently, he's doing an experiment where he's like, I'm literally gonna get fat again and teach people what not to do on keto. And I was just like, that's such a great way of looking at it versus like, this is what you do in keto. There's so many videos on that, but there's not enough videos on like what not to do in during keto, right? And I like it. It says people eat too much during keto or they like overdo calories. And while I don't read calories that well, if you eat more than what your body needs, you're gonna become fat. It's still like science. The science is still there, but like we don't have enough of that. But what not to do, right? Like it's always like do this, do this, do this, or like listen to this, listen to that, listen to this, listen to that. Something I've been focusing on is when I'm feeling uncomfortable about something. So when I was listening to the Candace Owens book, which is short, it was only a 6 hour listen on Audible. So I just like I treated it as a podcast. I would listen to it while I was doing things or driving or whatever. So many chapters I don't agree on. I was just like, this is making me uncomfortable. That's how
Mhm.
bad it was. But I fought through because I was like, I need to hear what she means. And then I need to go and dig. Or like I would pause sometimes in Google. Favorite chapters on it that really made me think were the one on media. She has a chapter on media. She has a chapter on race and racism, obviously, and it's the longest chapter, so I highly recommend that folks listen to that. On Audible, what's a fantastic is that you can return a book, you can purchase another book utilizing a credit, finish it, and then return that one to get another book. So you don't even have to pay for it in a sense.
Audible hack.
Audible hack, like just return it, and then once you're done, that's what I did. I like returned the old book that I already had listened to. I got this one with the credit, so I didn't even give it money. And then once I was done, I returned it. Like it's so simple. So if you feel like you don't want to vote for your dollar, you can utilize that tactic. So that's what I did to get her book, and like those race, media, and I think she had one on socialism that was really good as well. Those three chapters. Oh, and feminism. So she has four. That was just like, oh, we've been fed this other narrative, at least for me, and now she's talking about this thing, and she's breaking those. She's just like, well, if you look at the information, she talks about data. She talks about certain people she's talked to on her podcast, and she brings up all these things. And I'm just like, and like they'll battle for a bit, like in my head, like a lot of what she's saying is making sense, but based on what I remember, that also makes sense, and they kind of clash. So what's the truth here? And that's where I have to dig. I'm still doing the diggings. I don't have the answers. I don't think any of us will have the answers. It's really about like, what's the context? Like where are you living? How old are you? Like all these things come into play that people don't think about. It's just like all this comes into play. It's very nuanced. It's very like you agree 1 minute and 7 years later you won't agree with that same opinion. Like that's something that we do too. We believe 20 years later that someone still has the same opinion, which is not, I don't think that's right because we change as human beings. We go through
Yeah.
our own experience and life happens to us, and then we're just like, oh, I changed my idea on like that I used to think before because maybe my parents thought of that and fed it to me. But now because I have this knowledge, I don't agree with that narrative anymore, even though I put it on Twitter or YouTube or whatever. Now people are fighting me for it. I think a few comedians talk about that, like Tom Segura, Jim Jeffries, like all these comedians that say like I said this thing years ago and people just like demolished me for it, but fuck it, I changed. Like that's okay. But I think there's this whole idea we need to think more and stop you going to our emotions and reptilian brain. This is what I teach with my current like at work right now. It's just like, hey, don't trust your brain. Like your brain is this old thing that hasn't kept up with what we have created as
Yeah.
human beings. So guess what? You can't trust yourself in a sense. Like there's a gut part, but guess what? You have to learn how to have
Yeah.
self-awareness. That takes time to fucking learn. You're gonna fuck up a lot, and that's okay. You know what I mean? Like you're gonna
Yeah.
change.
Part of that gut understanding, and this is something that I'm returning to now, is what's not going to help is you watching videos over and over and over and over and over again about things. Whether, even if they are moderate, even if they are interesting and have different views, even if you're doing that, even if you're listening to those types of that type of content, there's still some level of you need to get the fuck away from all of it, and because it all drives emotion, right? Either it's giving you pleasure because it's strengthening your identity, right? It's strengthening your ego in the sense of like, this affirms my existence, this affirms my reality, and therefore it makes my reality more and more true. Or it's the opposite. It's causing you fear and chaos and uncomfortability, and because it's denying your reality, it's denying what you've accepted as real, and therefore it's breaking down your ego, and that also makes you just emotional, and then you're from that emotion you're going to choose how you're going to vote. From that emotion you're going to choose what you're going to say to people, how you're going to treat people, what type of content you're going to repost on your channel, um, and how you're going to live your entire life. And until you break away from that for a period of time, you get out into nature, or you just turn everything off and you sit for a few minutes, you meditate, you relax, you start to, at least for me, like I'm starting to meditate again because of all this, because I'm like, I need to deliberately find stillness in my life. And well, you start to realize that like all of these things, all of it means absolutely nothing. All of it means absolutely nothing on both sides. Not it means nothing, because when you're dead, it's not what you're gonna worry about, right? At all. And I think that's what's so strange to me is like, yes, we have these pockets where there's outward violence done to specific groups on both sides, um, and those things we need to have answers for that. But it's not the ideas are only going to get us so far. There has to be a basic level that is a basic consciousness that's agreed upon, on all levels, on all platforms. That no matter how much I disagree with you, I recognize that you're a human having a human experience that has its own pain, its own pleasures, its own family, its own biases, its own limitations, and things that are gross about it and beautiful about it. And so no matter how much we disagree on a topic, it should never be to the point where you as a person are terrible and need to be shut down and put away and canceled and all of these things, unless you're doing physical damage to someone, unless you're instilling your will on someone else's natural rights. Unless that's happening, it should just all be played. This should all just be played, right? Like, and it should all be fine tuning. Like when you're if you're playing basketball, you're playing some sort of sport. You're trying to get to a goal, and you have to make minute uh, uh, calibrations every step of the way. Same thing with shooting an arrow. Same thing with shooting a gun. You need to make minute calibrations to get to the right space. You don't expect that you're just going to have it in the first try. You don't expect that, right? And if we all saw each other as one organism, right? The human race is an organism, and the goal of this organism is to evolve our consciousness, evolve our ability, evolve our understanding of who we are, and get closer to whether it's God or the universe, whatever you choose to believe. Then we have to work as a single organism to self-calibrate and move towards this thing. And so we need people who disagree with us. We need people who don't believe what we believe. And we have to understand that the reason that is because, one, it's definitely because of social media right now, hands down. It's definitely because of these AI bots that trigger those things. And so we have to be very careful about how we use this technology. And we will put in, go watch the Social Dilemma, check out the resources on their website. We'll also link how to take control over your phone and your social media, like a guideline in this description, so you can go ahead and do that. Me and Ruben both did that last night. It'll be super helpful. Go check that out. But understand that outside of that, which is heavily driving it, me and Ruben have had completely different life experiences. Even though we grew up in the same borough, there's a lot of things that we like and enjoy and relate to, but there's lots of things that we probably disagree on, and we've had disagreements. We've had real life disagreements on things, and him and I both have had uncomfortable situations. I'm a white man with a family from Russia, and Ruben is a Puerto Rican man with a family from Puerto Rico, and we grew up in different neighborhoods, but we still find a way to, okay, even though I disagree with that, here's all this other dope shit that we agree on, and so we're still going to be the best of friends because that matters more to me, and I'm happy that Ruben disagrees with me on things. I'm happy that someone challenges my belief system. Same thing with my girlfriend. There's tons of shit that she does or that she believes that I do not believe at all, to the point where we've had raging conversations about it, but I don't stop loving her. I don't stop, enjoying her company, because there's tons of shit that we do agree on and that we find interesting together, and I've seen myself better understand her perspective, and I've seen her also better understand my perspective. And that only happens through time, and that only happens through respect. It doesn't happen by, oh, well, you feel this way today, so I'm going to demonize you forever.
And that's what we tend to do, right? It's funny because like even like last night we hung out with those friends that I told you about prior. Like if you listen to a previous Spartan Journal, we went out with these new friends that we met a few months ago here in the Bay Area. And we hung out with them again. And like I mentioned before, like there's, one vegan and two vegetarians on that side of the spectrum. But like, dude, hey, that's your life, man. Like if you, I already shared that, like I do nutritious coaching, like, that I eat whole foods, I still eat meat and all those things. And they respect me for that. Right. I respect their, like they got yesterday, we had like a pizza movie night or whatever the case may be. Karina graciously like bought pizza for everyone and didn't ask for money. And they were like, no, we're good. We're going to actually get our own vegan pizza. We didn't be like, oh my God, are they thinking, like some people like to like, create little stories in there. Oh, maybe they don't like us, or they think they're too good for us, or all these things. That thought never came to us. They're like, oh, we respect their decision. They decided to get their own pizza because this place that we went to doesn't have vegan pizza. It's not an option. They decided to get their own option and get their vegan pizza. Great. I was talking to a guy yesterday. He was like, I eat 10 bananas in the morning. In my head, I'm like, holy fuck, your insulin levels must be crazy, right? Like the nutrition part of my head. I was just like, how does that work for you? And he was like, great. I drink my celery juice. He eats his vegan shit. And I'm just like, bro, like, you're still a cool dude. We agreed. Like, he listens to David Goggins and Jocko Willink. We fucking connected on that, right? We like similar movies. Like, dude used to be in the military, so I've asked him questions about being in the Navy and like going, I think it was Navy or Air Force, I forgot. But like going through that experience and like, living in the Bay Area, growing up here, like he has all these amazing stories. And even though I disagree with his nutritional options, right? Like I don't think it's healthy. From what I've done, I'm not gonna like hate him for it. It's just like, no, we have all these agreements in other places, man. It's all good, because you see online, like the vegan like crowd are a bunch of like crazy people, right? At least from what I've seen. Not all of them are crazy. It's just the ones on the internet. Yeah. But Joe Rogan, what happened?
The ones who are the loudest are usually the ones who are the most extreme.
Yeah, exactly. So it's just like, oh, but actually they're really cool people. Like the people we were hanging out with. I was just like, and they're vegan, I can have this character model of them because of what I see on the internet when, when Miley Cyrus is on Joe Rogan's podcast and discusses like veganism not good for her. And I talked about this last time and looking through our comments, I was just like, oh my God, wait, if I was her, I wouldn't be able to read those comments. It was too much of what those people were saying about her. And he's just like,
Mm.
these are things that we have to, it's like, hey, I agree with your choices, man, because there's just, we can control the narrative on what's going on social media. We have to help
Yeah.
each other right now, man. Like shit is hard. Like I want to support and give people, some sense of some semblance of like everything's gonna be okay. Like we'll figure this out. We always do. We always adapt. We're amazing humans. And yeah, shit sucks, but I think we'll get out of it eventually. I'm optimistic about it. And you can listen to podcasts of folks who are smarter than me who are also optimistic about it, right? Um, but it's definitely a place right now this year. Like I said earlier in the podcast, like 2020 vision, like getting the full story, getting the full picture of it all, and like
Yeah.
hopefully we can somehow like through grassroots or through our individual through social media even like shift the narrative and be like, hey, that what we were doing is not working, we need to shift, right?
Yeah.
um so, and there's a lot of things coming out right now that are saying like, here are some ways we can do it,
Yeah.
and they're giving us the solutions. So we just got to find them.
Yeah, and that example you just brought up, like that was a big lesson that I learned from, because, and you know this from experience, that I can be I have been a very judgmental person in the sense that like, especially, and I'll admit this now, like, and I've admitted this to you before and to everyone before, where it's like I used to be very critical about people depending on how they ate, right? What they chose to eat in a moment. And um, I never even thought about why until a certain point. I never even thought about like, well, why do I get so critical? I just did it. Like I would just see someone, and then inherently there would be this feeling of like, you're not eating the right thing, you're destroying your body, blah blah blah, whatever. You're less than, it's not even that I'm like consciously thinking these things. It's just like a reaction. I would just be very reaction driven, and I would voice my opinion at times, or I'd give people certain looks or act a certain way, and and it would always backlash on me because people then would not trust me or feel like I'm judging them, which I obviously was. And what I over time realized was I was doing that because of my own fear of what those foods mean, my own shame around eating those foods when I was younger and I was, terribly overweight, and how people made fun of me and all these things, and my I guess jealousy of that. I don't allow myself to eat those foods because if I do, then I feel like I'm going to gain a bunch of weight, or I'm going to, or like, I'm going to go back to that fat kid that I was. And this took a good amount of time for me to realize the things and understand these things. But I think that applies to everything. The moment you start willing your belief systems onto someone, it's almost all the time out of fear. It's almost all out of fear that uh, that you're not secure in your belief system. The moment you start telling someone how they're supposed to feel, telling someone how they're supposed to act, telling them what they're supposed to believe in, you want that so it reaffirms your belief. Because if it doesn't, then you have to question if this person who you love, or this person who seems like an honest, understanding human being who's a critical thinker, and they having all of that are able to believe something else, well, then that automatically forces you to question, well, knowing all that, if they believe something else, is what I believe true? And if you haven't come to a grounded position that it doesn't matter what anyone else believes, um, what I'm going to choose what I believe in this moment, and I'm open. I'm open for my identity to change. I'm open for that for there to be something else in the future. Um, if you don't have that, that's probably why you are pissed off about what other people believe in. Again, there's a huge difference between someone who's being a straight up dictator and like, I think maybe you shared this with me, or I don't know where, I think it was on the Joe Rogan podcast about this idea that like they put, they put Hitler, Stalin. There was a guy who was interviewing people on the street, and they put Hitler, Stalin, and Trump, and maybe one other dictator. They had like pictures of them, and they said like, you know, uh, who can you order these people from best to worst, right? Who you think was from best to worst? Who was the worst of leaders of all of these? And majority of people put Trump. And what that tells you is that like you have such a skewed understanding of of how the world works and has worked in the past. And it's such a shame because when you really think about, you could talk all the shit you want about America, all the shady stuff that's happened here, all the terrible things that have happened here. You can talk about how there are, other countries that have similar laws and are happier and operate better. And at the same time, you still live in this country and you don't live in a majority of the world where things are really fucked up and there's real dictatorship and there's really things that, if a person wanted to do something, they can go ahead and do that with no commentary. The fact that we could even talk shit about Trump, the fact that we have the liberty to talk shit about Trump tells you how amazing this country is, right? And yeah, we're going through a rough patch, but we've gone through rougher patches. Like we've gone through it. And this moment doesn't define us as Americans, doesn't define us as the United States. And uh, again, I'm kind of going all over the place because I'm feeling so passionate. But God freaking if you find yourself hating someone for the way they act and the way they believe, if it's not directly affecting you, if they don't have if they're not causing direct pain to your body and to your family, direct and be really clear if it's direct, then it's you. It's all you. It's all your shit. And you need to go and deal with that and learn and understand what the fuck is happening. And you do that through conversation. You do that through silence. You do that through, if I feel like this is a new rule I want to start having with myself. I will not have an opinion on something unless I've heard the other side. Unless I've heard the other side and watched equal to amount of content that from one side to the other, I won't have an opinion on it because I can't. I can't. That's not how you have a conversation. Like I would need to have, and especially in a world where I can't necessarily go ahead and sit down with these people. Like if I had the ability to necessarily go and sit down with someone who has this experience and feel their energy and feel their pain and feel their, and see that they're functioning human beings, and yet they believe this thing that I completely disagree with. Until I have that experience, I will not humanize them. I will not humanize these people. I just see them as these emotions or personalities of evil or angry or ignorant or whatever this is. And so I don't know where this is all going, but you know, help me,
Just
Ruben. Help
talking
me.
off the dome, just talking
Yes,
off the dome. And
yes,
this is all recent. So like there's no right or wrong in terms of everything we're talking about. We've been pretty like in the middle, like in the gray,
yeah,
like no black or white. I think I was saying this before we hit the record button here, but I was just like, I want to listen to more people that are digging into the gray, which is bigger than both the black and the white side, like the duality of it. The gray area is so massive that I think people are so scared of it that they decide to stick to the one side or the other because it's too much work when we're inherently lazy, and it's too and it's too uncomfortable. We want to feel safe, and I want to feel good all the time, and that's the kind of the culture we've created, unfortunately. And this is why I love like reading Stoic literature or Stoic philosophy, because they were all about like, you don't want to be comfortable. You want to be prepared for anything, right? Or like, why are we, Mark Manson, who considers himself anti self-help, or like, you know, the dark side of self-help or something like that. His kind of like niche in there. And it's like these are the people that I look at because they're digging into the gray. They're not one side or the other. And maybe they are, but they understand that they like, maybe I'm on this side of the spectrum, but I'm giving myself the opportunity to dig into the gray, like really look in. Like we love the idea of bad versus good. You know, it's been in all the movies we fucking grew up with. It's been in all the movies. It's been in all the stories we've read as children. The bad and the good. There's a good guy, there's a bad guy all the time. You go through Star Wars, there's a good guy and a bad guy. And even then, like the bad guy, Darth Vader in this sense, wasn't inherently bad. He was just manipulated by Palpatine. Or if you watch the original Star Wars, like inherently he wasn't bad. Like he just had his own shit, right? And even in the end, he still did something good. Being the bad guy, he saved his son, right? If you watch the first three Star Wars, and you're just like, oh wait, there's more to it than that. That's why I love the idea of the anti-hero where they're like they don't make sense, right? Like the Punisher, for instance. And I bring all these in because a lot of my like coaching modalities is digging into game theory, like video games and entertainment, because I want to reach these people, right? Like gamers and the people who I most closely resonate with, because I was a heavy gamer. I was heavy into anime, heavy into all these like entertainment. And I'm like, I want you to learn from these and not just use them for entertainment and just be, you know, this mindless person. And at the end of their life, you're like, I wish I didn't spend so many hours watching these things. It's like, no, get lessons from it, get a learning from it. And I love these heroes that are, you know, that don't, they're not really heroes. They're like, they still kill people. They're not like Batman, who doesn't kill people, who's also a psychological fuck up. But like, there's sides to these people, and those are the ones that we should really look into, not someone who's too gold-hearted. Meanwhile, they're probably not. They have their own shit too. If you see someone that's too good, they're hiding something. You know what
Yeah.
I mean? And same thing when you see someone who's bad, they probably made tons of sacrifices for the greater good. And I'll just end with one thought. So um, I think last time when we were on the podcast with Dom, I talked about My Hero Academia, the anime, right? And there's a specific character in there. So for folks who want to watch it, spoiler alert, I'm going to throw it out there, so you can fast forward in this podcast here. But there's one character that's very unlikable in the beginning. His name is Endeavor. He is the second best hero, right? Amongst the first hero, he's like this beautiful, like he knows how to like play with the crowd. He's this amazing person. His only downside is that he can only hold on to his power for so long. Then he has to like decompress his power, and he can't use it for a certain amount of time. So the second hero, you think is just this mean, like bitchy person who abused his kids. They show all these like these points of history that he like trained his son to be this like killer, right? And he did all these horrible things to his son, and his other kids and whatever. And it's all to the point of being the best, right? Like he wanted to be the best. He wanted to be number one. He did all these sacrifices, including like fucking up his children to be the best, but also to be like, if I'm not the best, my children will be the best, right? And so like the last episode of the last season that I just watched, you get to really dig into the story, because they didn't really show too much of him. You just see him occasionally in every other episode, and he always has this smug face on. He never smiles. You never really see his true power. Every time he talks to somebody, he's very short. He doesn't talk to fans, right? Like the heroes all have fans and they take pictures with the heroes. The heroes are influencers in this sense, but he's one of those influencers. Like he made it to the top, but no one likes him. Everyone's scared of him. And finally, he steps up to the plate because the number one hero cannot do his work anymore. I won't spoil why, but this character, like he fights this supremely strong being, and the whole idea is that he doesn't give up. He's stronger than we always thought. Like he's getting his ass kicked, and he just keeps standing up, and you don't understand why. No one understands why he keeps standing up. They're like, why does this man keep standing up? And they show historically on everything he did, including fucking up his relationship with his wife. But little did you know, everything he's doing, he's making up for. Just because he did it in the past, he's making up for it right now. Whether that's sending flowers to his wife and making sure that he visits her every fucking day. No one knows that he's doing that. He doesn't speculate it. He doesn't put it out there, right? He's setting up his son who's beginning to understand, like he hated his father, but he's beginning to understand, oh shit, like my father's actually this amazing human being. Like, yeah, he did these bad things back then, but he's really doing it to make sure that we have a society that's at peace. But in order to have that peace, he had to make sacrifice. He had to do bad things, right? And like his son is starting to understand this and starting to root for him. So you're seeing this character growth in this one character, which is the son, and you're seeing this character growth in the father and how he doesn't give up and eventually wins that battle. He's all messed up. He does, and like what they don't understand, they always thought he didn't care about people, but during the battle, he made sure in the back of his head that he was avoiding like concentrated areas of people during that battle. So no one understood that. They always thought he didn't care about people, but you're starting to notice like, oh wait, he was this horrible, like we thought he was this person, but really
Mm.
he was actually this person. But he just never like showed it. He never like took pictures and shared on social media and did all these like, these interviews, and he didn't care about that. He was like, I want to be the best and that's what I'm working on. Get the fuck out of my way. You know
Yeah,
what I mean? Um,
that's
and,
awesome.
and that story really like resonated with me because I'm like, holy shit, I can only imagine how many people out there doing just that. Like they're not on social media, they're not on the interviews, right? They're just putting in the work and they're helping people and they don't care about being recognized for it. They're just helping them. They're doing it from the goodness of their heart, right? And some people may see them as horrible if they maybe have a few $1 million in the bank, right? And they maybe had to have done horrible things to get to that area, but now they're trying to make up for it, right? Um, so it's once again, it goes back to the nuance. Like there's so much in that gray area, and that story really showed me that. It was just a reminder, but I don't know. Like this is why I watch anime, man. Like there's so many lessons to be learned.
Yeah. That was awesome. That's an awesome sort of parable to explain what it is we're talking about here. So, yeah, I mean, I guess as we wrap this up and we we, we leave this episode, what's like if you could share one thing or a set of things that people can do as they move forward, because they're going to go back on social media, they're going to go back to YouTube, they're going to go back to watching and listening and responding and sharing and reposting all these. They're going to go back to doing all these things right now, like right this second. Um, uh, what are some things that you would want them to keep in mind as they navigate this terrain and how they move forward in their lives? All things considered.
I think the number one thing, and I always share this with people at work, is you need to read, man. Like, stop the bullshit. Stop trying to get these quick bites of information, these quick 5 minute. We live in a very fast paced society where we need the information really quick. We need to read shorter articles. No, you need to be comfortable with sitting with a 300-page book and fucking reading it. Same thing, you need to be okay with listening to the full podcast instead of just a clip so you can have a better understanding, especially if it moves you in an emotional manner and it brings out that anger, which is what usually the number one emotion that these articles, all these media giants really want to bring out of you. If it makes you angry, read a book on that specific subject. Take the time to learn the opposite. Like while it may be uncomfortable at first, you need to. If it's controlling, that's how you know you're being controlled, when you're getting pulled. Your emotional strings are being pulled, not your logical strings. So, and this is the beauty of being human. We get this frontal lobe that can help us in understanding and making a decision on what to understand. So definitely number one is reading books. Um, and number two is like similar to where you're doing, finding those moments of silence. I feel like, and I've done this. I've been a victim of this. I see Karina do it. We tend to not give ourselves moments of silence to just sit and think. Like it's like I can move from being with my headphones and listening to something on my phone to like going into my car, plugging in my phone, continuing to listen, to going to doing the dishes and listening to something, to going on my computer while I work. I have YouTube in the background. So there's always some input. But instead, like stop everything And what I've been doing is going on what I call my philosopher walks, no headphones, no phone, just walk for 15 minutes. That's all I do. And my brain is just getting rid of all these things, or taking a journal out and really like mind dumping on the journal. It might not make sense. You look at my journal entries as of late, they don't make sense. I'm literally just free writing what's immediate, my thoughts going into my head, and you're being bombarded all the time because I'm inputting so much. So it's like taking those times of silence and probably like mind dumping, you know, page vomiting in a sense, a lot of this that's going on in your head, and questioning yourself a lot of the time because you can't even trust yourself sometimes. This is why that quiet stuff comes. So those are the two things I would say: like read, like take the time to do that. Stop the small bits of information. They're not good for us. It's like fast food. It's like the fast food of information. Like McDonald's ain't good for you. Every now and then it's okay, but it's not good for you. So definitely take the time and have moments of clarity and peace in your life. What about you, brother?
Yeah, that was awesome. I think for me, I would say the biggest thing is to focus on yourself. Focus, like change. If you want to change the world, you got to change yourself, and that doesn't matter which way you sway, right? But if see where you have your shortcomings, see where you are biased, see where you don't understand something, see where you are uh, failing in your life, see where that's happening, see uh, where you where you can learn that directly applies to you. It doesn't have to apply to, again, this is just a moment. This is literally just a moment in the rest of your life, in the rest of history. You know, like when you look back at certain things in history, that moment was probably worse than this moment. There's so many moments in history where it's like, this is unimaginable terror and pain. And there's nothing compared to now, you know? So yes, is there a lot of danger? Yes. Is there a lot of scary things that are happening? Yes. Um, but instead of, you know, adding to the chaos, create more order in your life. And the order you create in your life is going to trickle down or trickle up and create order in the people around you in some way or fashion. So focus on yourself, because the as you raise your own consciousness, a lot of questions just get answered for you. You know, a lot of these things that we're talking about, you don't even need to practice them at some point, because you come to a point where you understand that everyone's human. And when you really understand, oh, everyone's human. Oh, everyone's human. Like when you really get what that means, you're not gonna fucking yell at someone and demonize them, because you see the the pain in them, you see in yourself, the beauty in them, you see in yourself. Um, and it's a whole new level of operation. So work on yourself, do the work on yourself. And then the second thing is get the fuck off of social media. Get the fuck off of YouTube and Facebook and Instagram as often as you can. I'm not saying you have to quit cold turkey unless you really can. Unless you have, unless you work in an environment where that's not part of your thing, right? Unless you're not trying to build a brand or work in marketing or do anything that those platforms support the growth of your business or your brand or whatever it is, get the fuck off of it. You don't need it. You really don't need it. So get off of it. And you have the luxury to get off of it because, you know, for me, I make money. I do marketing. We're trying to build something here. So we're going to use these platforms. And so if you do use these platforms, gain as much control over them as you can. Gain as much control over them as you can. Check out the guide that's listed in the description, and go learn even more ways that you can control the way you interact with the internet, because it is the wild, wild west right now, and you are way more subject to what's going on than you think. Um, and then the last thing is, when you do decide to participate in what's going on in society, uh, do it with an extremely critical eye and always hear the other side and always choose for yourself what you want to believe in. Choose really, and the way you choose is with information. You choose by understanding different perspectives. You choose by allowing others to be free thinkers, even if that means what they're saying is radically different than what you believe. Allow all these things to happen, and then engage with people, engage with real people in your life, have these conversations, um, and be extremely critical. And I think everything that we both just said here in these last few minutes, well, it can radically transform the way you interact, and pass this along to your friends, pass this along to people so that they can interact differently as well, because we sure as heck need it right now. And anyone who's out there who's like, I don't know what my purpose is, anyone out there who is wondering, if their life matters or how can they make their life matter, dude, every single one of us right now is in this fight for a better world. We all want a better world, and we may not all agree with exactly what that looks like, but we sure as heck need to uh, move towards a better direction, or we're fucked. We're literally fucked. So there's never been more purposes. There's never been more reason for you to participate and to be a better human and to interact with people and to um, have conversations. It's never been a better time because each of our voices counts like never before. And the more you can spread this idea of nuanced conversation and grayscale and digging into the gray and all these things, the better our society can operate. So that's it on my end. Ruben, what do you say? We call it a day here?
I have one last thing because something you mentioned, I was just like, oh, that's also a good point. And I take this from people like Jordan Peterson who do this fantastically. I highly recommend checking out a lot of his interviews. You can just search Jordan Peterson interview and watch them. But being able to, I don't like to use the word argue, but for the lack of a better term, I'm going to use that word, but be able to argue the point of the other side better than they can. So whether let's say you're a hardcore Democrat, right? And we mentioned we come from cities like New York. I currently live in a Bay Area, very leftist ideals and everything. But I want to be able to argue with a Republican and just know everything going on that side as well, as probably better than them. And once again, like you said, there's a lot of purposes. There's a lot of information out there to look through to be able to be like, hey, I've read all the information that's on the conservative side. I still don't agree with it. Amazing. Guess what? When you have a conversation and you can have a respectable conversation, not an argument, respectable conversation with someone from the other side, you already know what they're going to say. And that's why I bring up Jordan Peterson, because he's done this fucking fantastically in a lot of the interviews, whether that's the interviews on feminism that he's talked about, on like, the whole idea of women not getting paid as much as men, like very controversial. But if you watch him in those interviews, you're like, damn, this dude is killing this other person. And it's, the points they're bringing, he has a rebuttal for them. Like he immediately knows to talk about studies to go through. Like it's just mind boggling. So please take the time to study that specific thing. And if you can, be more knowledgeable than even the other side. Trust me, it will help in your conversation, and maybe you'll even be able to bring them to your side, right? If that's the case. But at the end of the day, everything is gray. We live in the universe. We live on planet Earth, which is a spaceship in comparison to thousands of other planets. So nothing really matters. It's very nihilistic, but it doesn't, right? So at the end of the day, I think we should just have a good time.
Yeah, go have a good time. Go play in the sand. Go have a nice drink. All things considered, just go have a good fucking day because it might be your last. So enjoy yourself. This
Exactly.
has been a great time, Ruben. I'm happy we got to talk about this. This has been cathartic as fuck. As always, if you like what you heard, if you like what you heard, give us a thumbs up. Please leave us a review. leave us, 5 stars. It really, 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 really helps. Share with a friend, and let us know if you like this type of content, if we should talk more about these things, because we got some opinions, man. So thank you, thank you, thank you. Stay tuned. We got another interview coming up pretty soon, a pretty cool guest. And stay tuned for more Spartan Journals. And we'll talk to you soon.
We'll
Thanks
talk
for tuning
soon.
in to the Hidden Health Podcast. I am Jesse.
And I'm Ruben. Peace out, folks. Much love.
Peace.